Okay, let's unpack this. We have two incredibly ambitious works of fiction landing in our source stack today,
Right.
but they are presented through, well, through radically different lenses.
Totally different worlds. On one side, we're looking at the sequel to a globally best-selling dark romance phenomenon.
A book that promises high fantasy, epic scale, and this really deep sense of personal sacrifice.
And then on the other side, we're grappling with a comprehensive critical review of Brimstone.
The start of the Diogenes trilogy by Preston and Child.
Exactly. And this isn't a small undertaking. We're talking about a massive, multi-volume intellectual mystery, a 700-page commitment built on this Gothic atmosphere, meticulous research, and of course the genius of its protagonist.
It's a study in duality, isn't it?
Mhm.
The first one, the fantasy sequel, it leans so heavily into the aesthetic. You know, the packaging, the intense emotion, the immediate, very personal stakes.
While the second is defined by its sustained intellectual depth, its huge global setting, and its ability to blend this literary sophistication with genuine supernatural tension, all over this huge page count.
So our goal today is to give you a really thorough, targeted understanding of what makes these two literary worlds tick. The high stakes, the defining characteristics.
We're extracting the crucial knowledge, basically. Everything from these powerful, reluctant queens who are grappling with a fatal physical flaw.
All the way to enigmatic FBI agents chasing shadows across, ancient Italian ruins.
Yeah, and we're doing it while trying to avoid the information overload that would come from, trying to read 1,500 pages of source material yourself.
Exactly. We are moving from the high-stakes political turmoil of the blood courts and this mysterious, lethal Quicksilver boundary.
Straight into the globe-trotting, Gothic-infused atmosphere of Agent Aloysius Pendergast.
And his search for answers buried in all these literary references. So let's start with the sheer scope and the aesthetic commitment of this fantasy sequel. So when we first look at the promotional materials for this sequel, the immediate takeaway is that this is not just a book. It's designed to be an object.
Oh, absolutely. The publisher is signaling a monumental investment in the physical experience.
That tells us a lot about the expectations of this readership, right?
It's a key insight into this whole genre's market. We're talking about a limited deluxe edition. It has metallic edges, gorgeous cover effects.
Designed end papers, a stamped foil case.
It's the whole package. For a genre like high fantasy or, dark romance, the physical artifact, the aesthetics, that's a crucial part of the engagement strategy.
But why do those physical details matter so much? I mean, what does a metallic edge or a stamped foil case actually signal to the reader about the story inside?
Well, it signals commitment
Mm-hmm.
and collectability. It raises the perceived value of the whole experience, and it reinforces the themes of the story.
How so?
These aesthetic choices, they promise a level of intensity and immersion that has to match the high drama of the plot. If the packaging is deluxe, the story inside is expected to be equally rich, detailed, and intense.
So the book itself feels epic before you've even read page one.
Exactly. It matches the intensity of the dark romance genre, which, focuses on these intense power dynamics, moral gray areas, and these brooding anti-heroes, often set in these really elaborate, heightened worlds.
Speaking of intensity, the themes are literally stamped right on the product description. They act almost like the moral constitution of the realm.
Right.
We have those four central pillars: duty, blood, honor, power.
And those aren't just decorative words. They are the functional operating system of the plot. You can feel that from the get-go.
They absolutely are. They establish the whole moral and political framework where every single character decision is going to be tested.
And when you put duty and power right next to each other like that, you immediately understand the protagonist is going to be torn. Torn between what she has to do for her realm and what she desires for herself.
And the inclusion of blood that signals the core conflict revolves around lineage, sacrifice, and probably a lot of violence.
Which is foundational to the genre, yeah.
We should also probably provide some context for the author, Callie Hart. She's already a #1 New York Times bestselling author for the original Quicksilver.
And she's well known for other dark romance and what people call dark academia titles.
Okay, so for you, our listener, who might not be totally immersed in these subgenres, how would you define that aesthetic? Dark academia.
Dark academia, in short, is a subgenre that romanticizes, higher education, intellectual pursuits, intense rivalries, but all with a distinctly gothic or tragic tone.
So old libraries,
Yeah.
secret societies.
Dangerous knowledge, exactly. And when you fuse that with dark romance, you get these powerful characters driven by intellect and this really intense emotion, often in settings that feel both ancient and intensely charged.
Which perfectly describes the vibe of a Blood Court sequel.
It totally does. It even explains why the author's creative process, sequestered in a library fantasizing about realms, is part of her professional narrative. She lives that kind of intellectual escapism.
That sets the stage beautifully. Let's transition now from the aesthetic framework to the intensely personal yet monumental burden that's placed on the shoulders of the protagonist, Sarah's Fane. Hashtag tag 1.2. The burden of Sarah's Fane, Queen of the Blood Court. So the narrative starts by establishing her core internal conflict, which is basically reluctance.
Yeah, she doesn't want any of it.
Sarah's Fane doesn't want power. The source material is explicit. She's actively avoiding having her name whispered across the entire court's lips.
Which is immediately gripping because she's the central power figure, but she actively rejects the celebrity and status that come with it.
It's the classic burden of the crown trope, isn't it? Just magnified.
Hugely magnified. She's now the queen of the Blood Court, and she's learning very quickly that a queen's life is entirely forfeit to the needs of the realm. The weight is enormous.
And the source material tells us her duty is paramount.
Right. Her ward and her brother require her back in her homeland, Zilverin. This obligation is the engine that drives the entire plot forward.
But here is the central, agonizing paradox that really defines the book's conflict. She is the required leader, the one they need.
Yeah.
Yet she is physically barred from making the journey.
And we need to dissect this quicksilver barrier because it is the ultimate narrative complication. It's brilliant.
Explain that. What is it?
It's a fascinating mechanism of an internal struggle that's made external, made physical. Saris was born under blazing suns, and this fact has created a terrible vulnerability for her.
Okay.
So very changes that strengthen her, that perhaps made her capable of defeating armies, like Kingfisher later does, have also made her mortally weak in a very specific way.
And that way is?
We are told, quite plainly, that traveling home through the Quicksilver, which we have to assume is some kind of magical transport system or maybe a dangerous geographical boundary, will surely result in her death.
Wait, let me just challenge that for a moment.
Go for it.
If the queen is the strongest person, the indispensable figure, why would the authors invent a physical weakness that only prevents her from traveling home? Is this just a convenient plot device to get the action started? Or is it something deeper, a necessary tragedy to deepen the theme of sacrifice?
That's an excellent question. I think it functions as both.
How so?
Well, on a plot level, it's undeniably convenient, right? It necessitates the delegation, which shifts the action away from the political court and puts it on the road. It gives us the Kingfisher narrative.
Okay, that makes sense.
But thematically, it's essential for the dark romance angle. It highlights the fatal cost of power. Her greatest strength is also her Achilles heel. She is the queen, she commands immense power, but she is physically incapacitated by her very nature.
So the paradox elevates her sacrifice.
Exactly. She risks her life not by going to war, but simply by existing in the wrong place at the wrong time.
So she's forced to delegate. She has to send someone else in her stead, and that person, well, they need to be equally formidable and utterly trustworthy.
Which is where Kingfisher enters the picture. Hashtag tag 1.3, Kingfisher and the Troublesome Smuggler.
So Kingfisher the Edge and Gate. He is immediately established as the antithesis of Sarah's Fane's reluctant, burdened intellect.
A complete contrast.
If she is the strategist who's trapped by physics, Kingfisher is the pure, battle-hardened agent of action. He is the resume, defeated armies, survived all manner of horrors. He is the necessary counterpoint.
His competence has to be unquestionable, especially since he's undertaking a mission the queen herself cannot. And this is what grounds his epic quest. It's not just about duty, it's personal urgency.
Right.
He must travel back to Zilverin quickly, not just for the realm, but specifically if he wants to see his mate again.
And that personal stake, the race against the clock for love, that's what makes his duty relatable and incredibly high stakes for the reader.
That's the primary engine, yeah. But the secondary and frankly more delightful source of conflict is his unwelcome companion, Carrion Swift, the smuggler.
Laughing slightly. Right. Kingfisher has survived actual horrors, but his primary headache in this book is traveling with a male who just will not shut up.
It's the ultimate narrative spice.
Yeah.
This pairing is a deliberate mechanism to inject chaos and humanizing annoyance into what could be a very monolithic quest structure.
So Kingfisher is the brooding anti-hero embodying the duty and honor pillars.
And Carrion Swift, the smuggler, likely embodies pure self-interest and humor. He's there to challenge the stoicism of his companion at every single turn.
And the specific dramatic directives Kingfisher gives him are just pure gold. They set up the entire dynamic from the start.
What are they again?
Keep your mouth shut, stick to the shadows, and for the love of all seven gods, do not crack any jokes.
And that immediately tells you, the listener, that Carrion Swift is going to do exactly the opposite of all those things.
Of course. And that internal tension, that's going to be just as important as the external threat they're facing in Zilvarin.
It's a genius move, really, because it prevents the high stakes from becoming too relentlessly grim. The humor, the constant low-grade irritation of a talkative rogue, it provides necessary relief.
While also deepening Kingfisher's character by forcing him to manage his patience alongside, world-saving efforts.
It's a very intentional literary choice. It's designed to make the journey entertaining even when the stakes are literally existential. Hashtag tag 1.4, the overarching threat and setting.
So the destination is Zilvarin, and specifically we're told they are heading for the narrow alleyways of the Silver City.
Right.
This transition from the grand open court to the city's grimy underbelly suggests the danger isn't going to be political intrigue anymore. It's going to be hidden street-level threats.
Exactly. The setting changes the nature of the threat. The Silver City is where hidden dangers and unfolding secrets pose these impossible challenges. It suggests espionage, double crosses.
The kind of intimate danger that armies can't easily solve.
Precisely. This is the necessary escalation for a sequel. The conflict has to move from grand battlefields to specific, intensely dangerous locations.
And the threat is truly encompassing. The peril isn't just about Cirrus or her ward or even Kingfisher's mate.
No, it's bigger.
We are told that a darkness falls across Euvelia. It puts the entire realm and all their friends in danger. It's a classic high-stakes declaration.
And it all culminates in that final unifying declaration of resolve. Even though they are separated by that lethal Quicksilver barrier, Cirrus and Fisher are united in their commitment.
Together, Cirrus and Fisher will pass through fire and brimstone to save them.
And the use of that specific phrase, fire and brimstone, is so highly charged. It connects their quest to a kind of moral or even mythological trial. It reinforces that the sacrifice is going to be ultimate.
That phrase, fire and brimstone, it actually serves as an unexpected yet perfect link to our second source.
Which deals heavily in intellectual mystery and, ironically enough, a very complex concept of hell.
Okay, now we execute that sharp pivot. We are leaving the blood courts, the talking smugglers, and the lethal Quicksilver boundary.
And we are diving deep into the globe-trotting reality of Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child's universe, as dissected by a critical review of Brimstone.
The shift is from aesthetically driven, passionate fantasy to meticulously researched, intellectual thriller.
We are moving into the world of FBI Special Agent Aloysius Pendergast, hashtag tag 2.1, defining Brimstone and the trilogy setup.
Now, Brimstone is pivotal for this long-running series because it is the official start of the Diogenes trilogy.
That's right.
For those who aren't steeped in the lore, why is this specific trilogy and this kickoff novel so important?
Because it shifts the focus. It moves from these external monster-of-the-week type mysteries to Pendergast's deep, intensely personal history.
So it becomes about him.
Yes. The Diogenes trilogy represents the primary, highly anticipated arc where Pendergast confronts the darkness of his own past. Specifically, everything related to his enigmatic evil brother, Diogenes.
So Brimstone is the setup. It's the atmospheric and intellectual foundation for that massive confrontation.
It's the first move in a very long chess game. The critical consensus on the book suggests it's wildly ambitious.
It successfully blends dark, atmospheric mystery with intellectual puzzles, but also sustains a supernatural tension. They're walking a very fine line between, say, a police procedural and a gothic horror story.
And that's the signature of the whole series. Pendergast's eccentric charm and his brilliance are the glue that holds it all together. He's intelligent enough to solve the historical literary puzzles, and he's odd enough to believe in, or at least rigorously investigate, the supernatural possibilities.
Which results in this adventurous, often haunting novel that demands and really rewards reader investment.
Okay, looking at the specific praises from the reviews, what are the elements that consistently made this book a series highlight for invested readers?
The intellectual layer is paramount. You see that again and again. Readers repeatedly praise the wonderful literary references. And this isn't just window dressing.
What do you mean? It means the mystery is solved by engaging with history, with literature, with art. It satisfies the audience that seeks depth and intellectual rigor alongside their suspense.
And the settings, New York and Italy, are crucial. They aren't just backdrops, are they? They're integral to the plot.
Oh, completely. They allow the narrative to expand geographically and aesthetically. It gives it this rich international flavor. Specifically, the descriptions of Italy, the ruins, the architecture, the history, they're cited as a huge success in establishing that Gothic atmosphere you need for a mystery dealing with ancient evils or Faustian pacts.
And crucially, they succeeded in crafting the antagonist, which is, that's critical for a long-running trilogy. The villain is described as chilling and perfectly crafted.
That speaks to the quality of the intellectual threat. In a trilogy arc, the villain can't just be a murderer. They have to be a true foil to the hero's intellect.
A Moriarty to his Holmes.
Exactly. They must be manipulative, sophisticated, and memorable. The success of Brimstone really hinges on setting up a long-term antagonist who can maintain that level of tension across 3 books.
We also can't overlook the fan-favorite dynamic between Pendergast and his reluctant partner, D'Agusta.
Oh, never.
And the way the book just leans into the eerie, the intellectual, and the unexpected.
Absolutely. And the structural payoff was noted by a lot of reviewers. The book ends on a cliffhanger, which delighted readers who enjoy those long-running, serialized arcs.
So the authors successfully laid the groundwork for the whole trilogy. They made sure that you, the listener, are immediately hooked into the next book. Now, we have to acknowledge that a 700-page book of this ambition is going to generate some friction points.
Of course. No book is perfect.
What were the most common critiques of Brimstone?
The main critique really centers on structural integrity and pacing. The middle section was often perceived as slow or overly detailed, which is a common hazard in these really dense intellectual thrillers.
And where specifically did the pace drag? Was it Pendergast's deduction process?
Yeah.
That can sometimes get a bit long-winded.
No, surprisingly, it wasn't that. It was the deep dive research required for the atmosphere. The long passages dedicated to Italy, art history, architecture, and the complex theoretical concept of hell.
Oh.
While those details add intellectual flair, they occasionally derailed the immediate momentum of the central mystery. The commitment to realism and atmosphere became a burden on the narrative velocity.
Pushing the book past that 700-page mark.
Exactly. It sounds like the book's greatest strength, its intellectual commitment, is also its main flaw for some readers.
Another critique that was mentioned was predictability.
Yes, some readers found the identity of the culprit somewhat predictable. But what's interesting is the analysis that follows that critique.
Which is?
The consensus was that the true intrigue was not the who, but the how and the why. This confirms that Brimstone functions less as a classic Agatha Christie whodunit and more as a detailed intellectual chase focused on motive, method, and thematic exploration.
And finally, that ultimate tightrope walk, genre expectations.
Right.
When you promise a blend of grounded deduction and the supernatural, you risk disappointing people who want pure one or the other.
Precisely. Some readers wanted more overt horror, a more definitive supernatural ending, and then conversely, others who appreciated the slow build of dread felt that the final supernatural explanation, when it finally arrived, was over the top.
So it's a can't-please-everyone situation.
It just illustrates the extreme difficulty in satisfying 2 very different genre fan bases while navigating that razor-thin line between logic and impossibility. #TED 2.4. Character complexity and thematic depth.
But the characters, particularly Pendergast and D'Agusta, they remain the stable, lauded center of the novel.
Always. They're the anchor.
How is Pendergast described, and why does he resonate so much with readers?
Pendergast is consistently praised as enigmatic, elegant, and brilliant. He's often positioned as this outsider operating by his own rules, a highly intelligent, wealthy aristocrat working for the FBI, which is a contradiction in itself.
And he can solve these esoteric riddles involving ancient history while maintaining this calm, almost otherworldly demeanor.
Which makes him the perfect guide through the intellectual chaos of the plot.
But his necessary counterweight is D'Agusta. He is the human element, the grounding force.
D'Agusta is absolutely crucial. He is the relatable, working-class detective, the emotional anchor for the entire series. He feels deeply human, and readers root for his personal struggles, his marriage problems, his frustration with Pendergast's bizarre methods.
Without D'Agosta, the series would risk floating off into pure intellectual abstraction.
Completely. He gives the audience permission to be skeptical, to be frustrated, and most importantly, to care about the human cost of the mystery.
We also see the introduction of the mysterious Constance. She is clearly being set up as a long-term player in the series' mythology.
Her introduction, though some critics described it as abrupt, is necessary. It's there to set up the emotional and historical weight for the upcoming trilogy. She links Pendergast's past with the current situation and foreshadows the deep family dynamics that will unfold when Diogenes finally arrives on the scene.
So if we connect this whole character web to the thematic core,
Yeah.
what are the high-level concepts that truly define the intellectual stakes of Brimstone?
I'd say 4 concepts really stand out. First, the idea of Faustian bargains,
Okay, selling your soul.
basically. This theme, sacrificing morality, ethics, or even your soul for power or forbidden knowledge, is the foundational ethical challenge of the book. It's often intertwined with the pursuit of eternal life or ultimate artistic achievement. The novel just digs into the price of ambition when it crosses into the forbidden. The blurring of the lines, it's the constant tension between the supernatural explanation and logical deduction. Pendergast's brilliance is constantly tested by phenomena that seem to defy scientific explanation.
Forcing the audience to constantly reevaluate whether we are in a true crime thriller or a straight-up Gothic tale.
Third, the nature of evil itself. Specifically, the concept of evil masked behind sophistication and charm. The villain is chilling precisely because they are not a brute. They use intellect, elegance, and history as their weapons.
Which makes them a worthy adversary for Pendergast.
The only kind of adversary he could have, really. And finally, the looming presence of Pendergast's personal history, which culminates in the foreshadowing of Diogenes.
Why is that name so significant for the theme?
Well, Diogenes was a Greek philosopher known for his extreme cynicism and his contempt for convention. He was the figure who allegedly carried a lamp in the daytime, searching for an honest man.
Right.
So by naming the antagonistic force of the trilogy after this philosopher, the authors are signaling that Pendergast will be facing a highly cynical, intellectual, and morally bankrupt foil, a figure that directly challenges his own sense of justice and humanity. Hashtag TagTag 2.5, audio experience enhancement.
Given the sheer length of this book, over 700 pages, and all those detailed passages on foreign locations and architecture, the audio experience becomes critically important.
It's paramount. The source material specifically highlights Scott Brick's narration quality as being key to elevating the story and mitigating some of those pacing critiques we mentioned.
That makes sense.
In a long book that's full of detailed research, a poor narrator could make that middle section truly unbearable.
But Brick's performance seems to have been highly professional, especially his smooth, controlled Pendergast accent, which is just essential to conveying that elegant, enigmatic nature we were just talking about.
Absolutely. And his excellent Italian pronunciation must have been vital during those lengthy, localized scenes in Italy. It maintains the illusion.
So the professional delivery of the foreign language and the maintenance of the character's voice, it prevents the intellectual density, those passages about art and history, from becoming dry and academic.
Yeah, the audio format acts as this layer of necessary immersion that helps you, the listener, glide through the detailed portions that textual readers sometimes found slow.
Okay, so now that we've deeply analyzed these two sources, we need to bring them back together and compare how their different forms of ambition and detail actually manifest in two wildly different literary markets.
It's really a study in commitment to immersion, isn't it? Regardless of the genre. Both worlds promise an existential, high-stakes threat, but they justify it through totally contrasting literary structures.
Right. The fantasy world uses the darkness falling across Euvalia, a universal world-ending peril.
Which is made immediately personal by Ceres's physical inability to confront it herself.
Whereas in Brimstone, the threat is more philosophical. A Faustian bargain, evil masked by charm. But it's equally destructive, threatening Pendergast's sense of reality and even his family.
And consider the investment in setting. The fantasy novel creates these specific invented geographies, the Blood Court, Zilverin, the lethal Quicksilver, and these have to be internally consistent and rich with lore to feel real.
That's the heavy lifting of high fantasy world building.
It is. Now, contrast that with Brimstone. Their commitment to setting is real world, but it's exhaustively researched. The description of New York and Italy was so dense with art and architecture details that it actually slowed the pace for some readers.
So the ambition there is to ground the impossible in verifiable historical reality.
And here's where it gets really interesting. This commitment to detail shows us the distinct marketing strategies that are required for success in both of these genres.
Go on.
The fantasy authors commit intensely to the deluxe physical package, the metallic edges, the foil stamping, because the aesthetic is integral to the value proposition for that dedicated fan base. It's part of the product.
While the thriller authors, Preston and Child, they commit intensely to intellectual depth and critical validation, sometimes sacrificing pace for historical accuracy.
Their value proposition is the sustained intellectual challenge and the depth of the world, which is validated by critics who praise the literary references. They're selling complexity, while the fantasy is selling an immersive aesthetic experience.
It's a question of where the authorial effort is concentrated then.
I think so. In the fantasy, the effort is focused on personal stakes. Ceres's fatal flaw, Kingfisher's race to his mate, and this very visual, aesthetic world building.
And in the thriller, the effort is focused on intellectual rigor, the Faustian bargains, solving the historical puzzle, and series longevity, setting up Diogenes for the long haul.
And let's just revisit the character tension drivers because they are fundamentally different.
In the fantasy novel, the immediate conflict is external, and it's almost interpersonal comedy. Kingfisher, the highly efficient warrior, has to manage Carrion Swift, the irrepressible smuggler who just will not shut up,
The tension is driven by annoyance and chaos.
versus the highly praised dynamic in Brimstone. That tension is intellectual and relational. The brilliant, elegant, and often aloof Pendergast relying absolutely on the deeply human, skeptical D'Augusta.
And that tension is driven by professional necessity and this profound personality contrast. One dynamic provides levity through forced proximity, the other provides grounding through conflicting worldviews.
But ultimately, both systems rely on a profound sense of duty, don't they?
That's a great point. Yeah.
Ceres is bound by the crushing weight of the crown, which forces her to delegate. Kingfisher is bound by the duty to save his mate and his realm.
And Pendergast and D'Augusta are bound by their duty to the law and to solving the intellectual puzzle, even if it pulls them into the forbidden realm of the supernatural. The specific expressions of duty may differ, but the commitment is absolute. So we've navigated from the blood court of Evalia all the way to the Gothic architecture of Italy, and the key takeaways for you should be the intense personal stakes of the fantasy narrative, Ceres's fatal weakness, Kingfisher's desperate mission, and the complex intellectual framework driving the mystery.
The Diogenes arc, the Faustian bargains, and that constant blurring of reality and the impossible.
Exactly.
This raises an important question, especially when we consider the ultimate test for these characters. Both sources rely so heavily on characters attempting to define the line between the physical, known world and the impossible.
Whether that impossibility is the lethal magic of the Quicksilver or the teased supernatural origins of the evil in Brimstone.
Exactly. So we leave you with this provocative thought. When those defining lines ultimately blur, when the magic or the supernatural element becomes undeniable and it has to be confronted head-on,
Is a brilliant, deductive mind like Agent Pendergast better suited to face the impossible purely because he approaches it as an intellectual problem to be solved?
or does it take the raw, battle-hardened commitment and sheer will of a warrior like Kingfisher to pass through his own form of fire and brimstone? What happens when intellect meets magic head-on?
And which kind of character would you rather have at your side?